Are you troubled by low-quality monophonic sound reproduction? Are you frustrated by your inability to share your musical taste with neighbors awake halfway down the street at any time of the day or night? Then you need the Crap Sounds 500. With its fully integrated wireless wax cylinder and large load twin tub arrangement, all powered by the latest Swiss clockwork wind-up system. It boasts one whole speaker, and the latest in no treble, bass-only phonic equalization. Never let those around you miss a beat of whatever you insist on listening to with the Crap Sounds 500, a Himmler-Krippin-Hague product. And now we present the sound effects of Erich Zann by D.R. Love Hughes.
Despite a lifetime of trying, I have never been able to find the house I lived in during those last troubled months at university. It remains a humiliating fact, but despite years of wandering the city and its grimy outer suburbs, and in spite of endless poring over historical pornography, I have been unable to even find the neighborhood. Neither have I ever met anyone who's even heard of the street, the Rue Danny. That my memory may be badly flawed, I do not wonder. My mental and physical health were already fragile when I moved in, and after that last terrible night, I suffered a total nervous collapse and spent several months living as a marsupial in the Hôpital Gâteau de Fruits at Versailles. My name is Henri Chavard. In 1958, I was in my third and final year studying metaphysics at one of Paris's most ancient and cripplingly expensive universities. I had dazzled the professors with my ontological treatise, explaining how my unpaid tuition fees could be written off, as they existed only in the mind of the observer. But the logical positivist in me knew I was up shit creek for blowing my whole year's budget on the biggest, most fuck-off high-end sound system you've ever seen. It was a bloody monster, a Crap Sounds 500, powered by the latest Swiss clockwork wind-up system. As a sound enthusiast, I was convinced the next big technological breakthrough would be a dramatic increase in clockwork life. And perhaps a picture of a kind of fruit somewhere on the box. A banana, maybe. In January of that year, I had been evicted from yet another mean student lodging house due to my landlady's strong classical position on the intrinsic existence of rent, coupled with a bourgeois inability to appreciate modern music. Who doesn't enjoy extreme bagpipe jazz fusion at 1 a.m? And finding my extensive collection of health and efficiency magazines in the wardrobe.
Get out and take your gramophone, your nudist pornography, and your extrinsic modal realism with you.
I had heard on the student grapevine of a cheap room to rent. It lay across the river, over an ancient tumble-down stone bridge in a grimy and run-down suburb. The Seine had a distinctively vile, malodorous smell at that point, and remember, this is an art student saying this. Smoke from nearby factories blotted out the light. The sun was nowhere to be seen, although I noticed Woman's Weekly and amateur gardening seemed to be available at most newsstands. I climbed incredibly steep streets to the very top of the neighborhood, and so, quite out of breath, found myself in an ancient, narrow street where tall, mouldering houses rose at crooked angles like crude literary foreshadowing. The one I had come to see was the tallest, 5 stories high, almost at the hill's summit. Its sharply peaked roof looked out over a towering, ivy-covered wall at the very top of the world. What I'm saying is this place was high. It was as high as a motherfucker. I was looking for the landlady, the drunkard, Madame Blandeau. Good afternoon. Am I addressing the drunkard Blandeau?
If you're from Amazon, it's about bloody time.
I'm not from the Amazon. I'm from Lyon, as my flawless French accent should tell you.
Leon Seymour like it. Say something quintessentially French.
Liberty, equality, fraternity. Let them eat cake. Cheese should be soft.
Well, that's French enough for me. What can I do for you, monsieur?
I've come about the room.
Oh, then come inside, monsieur. Mind the bottles.
What bottles?
Those ones. The room is on the 5th floor. 2 francs and 50 centimes a week. Payable 1 week in advance.
Do you take euros?
No,
Why not?
because they haven't been invented yet, you fool.
Clearly, she was a fiscal determinist, and I decided that was something with which I could work.
Have a candle.
But I'm not religious.
The lights have gone,
I see.
said the blind man.
The candle guttered into life, revealing the rotting balcony and peeling genuine 19th century onion skin wallpaper.
All right, I'll knock off a centime.
I wonder if I should have followed her.
Here we are, the 5th floor.
Is there anyone else or any expository text living on this floor?
Not on this floor, but there should definitely be some in one of the later scenes. Probably about page 12. There is someone in the garret above, though he is out most of this act. He works in a cheap theatre in town. A Herr Erich Zann.
That's an unusual name.
He's a Hun, you know. A kraut, a sausage muncher. A German.
I surrender!
My, you are French, aren't you?
I took the room, paying the week in advance and the weekend in milk bottle tops. Then I walked the half hour back to the dismal, hilly suburb, to the more cheerful atmosphere of the Two Maggots Cafe, where I took a simple evening repast. That evening's frugal offering consisted of smoked trout and cream cheese canapés, miniature quiche Lorraine, foie gras, lobster bisque, crêpes and sautéed truffle filling, moule frite, a modest 3-bird roast, ostrich, turkey and quail with rice, potatoes, pasta and petit pois, steak tartare, chicken chasseur, steak frites, mousse au chocolat, ice cream and squirty cream, lemon sorbet, a few grapes, and austerity cheese board consisting of only 19 different types of cheese. To eke out this basic meal, there was a basket of French bread and wine, red, white, rosé blush, port, dessert wine, cognac and cigars, finishing with absinthe and camembert chasers. As I was on a limited budget, and in any case was watching my weight, I didn't have the mixed salad. For a student of humanity, the Two Maggots was a great place to hang out. Students, intellectuals, ladies of the night, and Deliveroo guys all came to unwind and shoot the breeze. Sometimes they'd fire at other cheeses too. Jean-Paul Sartre would often hold court at the end of the bar. At that time, he was still in the philosophy game, running a market stall in the Marais district, scratching a living selling second-hand existential concepts and bon mots. but he had dreams of becoming a stand-up comedian and cleaning up on the corporate gig circuit. He always had a crowd around him as he told his jokes.
I felt myself in a solitude so frightful that I contemplated suicide. What held me back was the idea that no one, absolutely no one, would be moved by my death. That I would be even more alone in death than in life.
Oh, stop mucking about.
Oh, Jean-Paul, you are a coward.
Nice one, Simone de Beauvoir. Show us your titties.
Another round of drinks for my friends.
Oi, Ionesco, you've been told before, take that bloody rhinoceros outside!
Absurdity!
After a couple of dozen bottles of cheap red, my gramophone and I reluctantly left the light and laughter of the two maggots to begin the ascent through the cold winter night to my cheerless new abode. That first night, in my fifth-floor room, I heard the noise of a model railway set for hours on end from the attic room directly above me, punctuated by very strange sounds. Even after my travails ascending the steep hill twice that day, once lugging the bulky Crap Sounds 500 and a second time carrying the bulkier collection of pornography, I found it difficult to sleep, possibly because my wrist hurt. The noises were captivating, strange. They had an unearthly, haunting quality to them, like nothing I had ever heard before, like a ghost being catapulted into a slinky factory. Eventually, when I did fall asleep, I dreamt of immense, desolate spaces between the stars, of an absence of the moon or of any light from the stars themselves. It reminded me of the Contemporary British Composers programme on Radio 3. I felt the universe eddying and pulsing with primal, inhuman energy. And a vertiginous nausea. It all led me to the conclusion that perhaps I should avoid the absinthe and camembert chasers next time. And next day I ran into Madame Blandot by the post boxes in the lobby as she came in from her morning trip to the bakery.
I trust you slept well, Monsieur Cheval?
Oh, you know how it is the first night in a strange house, madame.
I most certainly do not.
There was something I meant to ask. The gentleman we spoke of yesterday who occupies the attic room above mine, does he play with his model railway every night?
Well, I've never heard a gentleman call it that before.
No, his train set.
The Bosch, you mean? No, Monsieur Zann does not have a train set as far as I know. He works in a cheap theatre, doing sound effects.
She said there'd be more expository text on page 12. I wonder if this is it.
What was that?
Nothing.
Good. He's been here for years. He absolutely insisted on that room as far away from the other guests as possible, as he said he often continues working on sound effects late into the night. Do you know, despite its sparseness, the cold, and the fact it requires a climb to the very top of this towering house, that room has one redeeming feature. It is the only room in the house, the only one in the Rue d'Annie, from whose window one can see over the wall at the top of the hill. You can see most of the city from there. Perhaps I should charge him more. Oh well, must get on. 1,000,001 things to drink, I mean do.
Yep, I think it's fair to say that was the expository text. Quite shamelessly and lazily crowbarred in, too. Perhaps this theatre company's got a career with Radio 4 after all.
No chance, mate.
My curiosity grew over the next few evenings as Herr Zann, returning towards midnight from the theatre, played his weird, somehow alien sound effects late into the night. It was a week after I first heard the noises that I resolved to engineer a meeting, or meet an engineer, whichever was the easier, really. And so I waited one evening by my door, ready to intercept him as he passed. Herr Zann, excuse me, sir. Good evening, sir. I thought I should introduce myself to my nearest neighbour. I've heard you playing your sound effects for the last few nights, and I must say I've been absolutely fascinated. He made no response, but by the light of the flickering candle he held, I perceived his bony, satyr-like face and staring blue eyes take on a strange expression of shock, offence, and something that spoke of fear, or possibly chlamydia. He nodded curtly and continued past me without a word. He had his foot on the bottom tread of the steep old wooden stair that led up to his garret room. Herr Zann, my apologies to waylay you when you're coming home from work. It's just I dabble in sound effects myself. I have a Crap Sounds 500, integrated wireless and turntable set. I'd love to jam with you some night, show you my coolest beat matching and turntabliest scratchings, yo daddy-o, in the hood, etc., etc. He turned and gave me an odd and appropriately pitying look. My friendliness must have melted him, or perhaps he thought it was the easiest way to make me shut up. In any case, a few moments later, I found myself in the attic room. Herr Zann lit another candle from the one he'd used to come upstairs, and I saw the whole immense space, which seemed even larger for its extreme bareness. The roof was lined with boards bearing no plaster, or paint, or boards. The only furniture was 3 chairs, a narrow iron bed, a metal music stand, and a gramophone with a large horn containing the head of a small dog, its arse pointing poignantly outwards towards the curtained, shuttered window at the far end. The window that commanded perhaps the best view in the city.
So, you want to hear some sound effects?
Yes, please, Herr Zann.
Very well. And first, allow me to remove this dog's ass from my gramophone.
Of course, Herr Zann. He sat in the least uncomfortable of the chairs, carelessly waved me into one of the other 2 with his Jack Russell, and began to play his sound effects.
I particularly like this one. It reminds me of my youth in the Bavarian Alps. A mountain goat wearing Wellington boots. And this is the sound of my mother buying a loaf of bread after the Wall Street crash of 1929. The Führer particularly liked this one, with the flugelhorn player burning his toast. Although he generally thought Bertolt Brecht's plays did not have enough jokes. Can you imagine?
Oh, mein Gott, mein Toast!
Dear me.
I was captivated by this display of artistry and craftsmanship. But good as these effects were, I had heard none of the strange, eerie sounds that had kept me awake this past week. Herr Zann, I've been hearing other sounds. That is, I don't really know how to describe them, but I think one of them went something like... I attempted an approximation of one of the weird, otherworldly sounds that had so intrigued me. His reaction startled me with its suddenness. Fear and shock were clearly etched onto his ugly face.
Hey, you're no oil painting yourself.
And in the bright, starting blue eyes. He reached out a cold, bony hand and stopped my mouth. Let go! At that moment, a sudden sound at the window caused us both to look round. Zann's hand came away from my mouth, and I thought again of the drunkard Blando's remarks about the view from this high window. With a certain capricious and perverse spirit, Zann's weird, rude behaviour had irritated me. I rose and went over to the window with the intention of flinging it wide open. With a frightened rage, twice as strong as before, Zann was on me, grasping my collar in his bony hands.
Don't!
What the hell are you doing? Take your filthy hands off my filthy neck! I order you to release me! But he held on for a minute, looking and listening intently at the window. And then, satisfied nothing more was to be heard, his manner became immediately friendlier.
I am so sorry, my young friend. Please, forgive me. I am an old man, and I suffer terribly from certain nebulous, unnameable fears and mysterious apprehensions connected with my work and the inevitable denouement of this narrative. Please, sit again. I shall play for you.
Quite reluctantly, I took my seat again.
This is a gramophone recording of a wax cylinder machine.
Zann played sound effects for perhaps another hour, chatting lightly and often, as if that whole scene had never happened. It hadn't escaped me how his manner had quickly changed once he was confident nothing was outside the window. But what could he be afraid of? Nothing could reach up here from any of the neighbouring houses, surely. Nonetheless, he was all charm once again. He even let me have a go at a malfunctioning cuckoo clock in a custard factory.
Yeah, oh dear me.
And the classic tree falling in a forest when no one is there to see or hear it. At length, when I rose to go, having inserted his dog back into the gramophone, he shook my hand warmly and pungently.
Please, I know my sound effects have kept you awake, and for that, and my nervousness, I have lived alone for many years, and I have developed many eccentricities. I beg forgiveness. Please, ask Madame Blandot to give you a better room on the lower floor. This way you will not be disturbed through the night. Please, I will cover the difference in price.
The next day, I spoke to Madame Blandot.
Your new room is between that of an aged cliché and a respectable non sequitur. There is also another room on this floor, the third, where any unnecessary expository text is stored.
I called on Zann a couple of times in the next week, but he did not seem at all pleased to see me. On the first occasion, he played his sound effects listlessly, and I could not help perceiving some subtle message was being communicated.
This is the sound effect of an unwelcome guest being thrown out.
The second time, he simply blew out the candles and waited for me to leave. Well, I'll be off then. See you, Herr Zann.
Yeah?
You couldn't just light one of the candles, could you? Please?
9.
Oh! Whoa! Fuck. Strangely, my fondness for Zann, unlike my collection of bruises, did not grow. When I did see him on the stairs over the next few weeks, his manner was even more distracted and furtive. He seemed preoccupied with listening for sounds I'm willing to bet no one else would ever hear. Still fascinated and haunted by his strange sound effects, I crept up the rickety wooden stairs several times in the early hours to listen outside Zann's door. The effects were growing increasingly frenzied and went on even longer into the watches of the night. And then came that terrible night. I'd once again climbed up and stood listening to the wild sound effects of Erich Zann. They rose from crescendo to impossible crescendo, and then...
Ah! Gott in Himmel! Get out! Out, get out! Go back to the hell from which you came!
Herr Zann! Herr Zann! And then at last, I heard a stumbling towards the door.
Gott sei Dank! Come in, my young friend, please, come in.
From the dark doorway, Herr Zann grasped hold of me like a long-lost checkbook, clung to me and pulled me into the room. He was shaking so much he could barely light a candle, but at length he managed it.
My young friend, I must once again beg your forgiveness for my bizarre and rude behavior. Please, sit and I shall play something soothing for us. And I shall write a lengthy account in impenetrable German of the dark fears which hold me in their morbid thrall. I doubt I shall ever be free of them in what remains of my doomed life. But there is a darkness beyond, an unutterable evil threatening mankind which must be kept at bay!
Jeff a cake?
Why, thank you. The wind had died down slightly, and save for the occasional slight rattle of a stray hobnob, there was no sign of anything untoward. I wondered again what lunacy Zann was subject to. He put a long-play record on one of his twin decks. I noticed it was one of the English dramatist Darren Gooding's plays. Clearly, he meant business and wanted ample time to complete his account. And so he began writing with a candle by the light of a pencil, casting the occasional frightened glance at the window as the sheets of paper built up into a pile. The record went on and on with no sign of stopping, passing the hour mark, then 2. I tried not to think of the audience's desperation. And then Zann and I both started.
Nein, not yet!
Zann's eyes bulged from his head in terror. He went straight for the second turntable and immediately launched into a sequence of feverish, desperate sound effects. These, at last, were of the same genus as the mysterious sounds which had so fascinated me as I listened from outside the room. There was a quality to them that was somehow not of this earth. Zann continued to play, sweat dripping off him, his body contorting like a monkey playing Twister against a can of Swarfega for another hour or so, while the monologue continued relentlessly on the other turntable. In the briefest of pauses as he selected another record, there came from outside a mocking answer. Zann froze, as if speared with a harpoon or something. The edges of the new record clutched between his fingertips, and then the shutter hammered against the window frame. The record slipped from Zann's hand as the window shattered. The effect on Zann was electric. He sprang for his box of records and pulled out a new one. A strong gust of wind rushed in, jostling the stack of handwritten sheets and making the candles splutter furiously. Zann dropped the new record, the complete sound effects library of library sound effects, onto the turntable, just as an even stronger gust sent the sheets tumbling up into the air towards the broken window. The candles sputtered insanely as I chased the papers across the room, desperate to catch them. The mad sound effect screamed behind me. My hand closed on thin air just as the sheets disappeared into the night. Suddenly, I was at the window, heart thrilling at the thought of seeing the moon and stars and the city's myriad twinkling lights through the wind and rain. And I saw nothing. No lights, no stars, no moon, just endless space. A strong gust laced with rain blew into the room and the candles went out. Disorientated, I turned back into the room towards the soothingly inaudible sound effects of an enumerative classification being supplanted by the Dewey Decimal System.
Welcome to Acme Insurance. In order to give you the best...
I nearly lost what remained of my sanity then. But I vowed at least to save Zann and myself from these things, whatever they were. I dropped to the floor and inched towards the turntable. All around me, sounds not of this or any sane world filled the air. It was a nightmare. And yet all the excitement had given me a pretty decent semi. Herr Zann! Herr Zann! And then, in the pitch darkness, I felt a cold hand. Woo! Something about it turned the blood to ice in my veins. Perhaps it was the way the fingers curled around my chubby. It reminded me of a baby's arm holding an apple. Believe me, in that insane nightmare room, I considered taking advantage of the situation. But then I thought of my collection of health and efficiency magazines and decided to save myself for later. As I followed the arm up to the shoulder, the jaw, and the face, I knew why the touch was so repellent. Erich Zann was not breathing, and there was no pulse. And yet his lifeless hand, the one that wasn't curled snugly around my piece, continued to manipulate the record of sound effects, skillfully taking the needle up and setting it down again and again, to ward off the horror which had slept for countless aeons in the absolute zero waste between dead stars.
Please stand back from the platform edge. This train does not stop at Hatfield Pivotal.
I don't know how I made it. My mind just holding on to this sphere of sanity by the slightest of threads, but at last I found myself at the door. Oh well, practice makes perfect, I suppose. I descended the 5 remaining stories of that monstrous dwelling, half flying, half running, half plain falling, and ended up at last outside on the cobbles of the Rue Danny. As I ran, more than half out of my mind and certainly half out of my trousers, I remember seeing the stars and moon twinkling brightly in a clear sky and the lights of the city on the other side of the river, and thinking that there was no rain or wind. After my release from the L'Hôpital des Lunatiques several months later, I went into teaching. Well, what else can you do with a degree in metaphysics? And besides, the adverts are so cool. As I told you at the beginning of this tale, I have never been able to find any trace of the Rue Danny since then. And yet, although it remains a mystery, I cannot say that I'm entirely sorry. Although I do bitterly regret the loss of the magazines. Neither am I sorry that the dreadful sheets written that dreadful night by the dreadful hand of Erich Zann have been lost forever. Those dreadful sheets, which alone could ever explain what dreadful horrors were kept at bay by the dreadful sound effects of the dreadful Erich Zann. Dreadful.
The sound effects of Erich Zann was written by Chocolate Dave Hughes. It is an I Hear Voices theatre company production. It featured the voices of Damien Bell, Darren Gooding, Sarah Ellen Young, Darren Tansley, and Tina Gooding. Sound production was by Darren Tansley, with additional material from the cold, lifeless hand of Erich Zann. The part of Ionesco's rhinoceros was played by Timothy Spall.
The person you have dialed has been removed.